Good evening, everyone. It is Sunday, the 16th of August, just shy of 6 p.m. and I'm just going to have a look at the global commodities. I'm going to start off with gold. So gold had a very nice overdue correction back into the highlighted area around that 1900 level, which to me is very satisfactory on the daily time frame. So beautiful, very happy about that. However, on the weekly, I was anticipating, or I would prefer to see a level at least down to about 1800 in order to let some of that buying pressure off on the weekly, and on the monthly, very much certainly down to 1800, potentially lower, down towards 1600. So I'd still like to see that. Having said that, if the market isn't done yet and it's at least it's let off some of this buying pressure, it has set up with a nice old bullish candle here in the moving averages, and there could then subsequently this week be a follow through and a continuation to the upside. So that is really, for me, is coming back to how much kind of tequila is being added to the punch bowl at this point in time, and I don't think there's any signs of it just yet. So my approach this week, it's interesting that we had a very strong recovery from that bounce above 1900, followed by a bullish candle that followed through. Then nothing really happened on Friday. And so what I'm going to be doing is daily in isolation, with the longer term trend being up, and there's definitely the markets are kind of pushing beyond their normal average kind of ranges. There's this, it just feels as though there's slightly excessive kind of movements on some of the markets. Just when I think they're going to take a break, or just when they should be taking a bit of a break, they keep going. So taking that into account, my approach this week is going to be to give it the opportunity to continue taking another run to the upside. But I'm still very much aware that a pullback down towards 1800 and lower would be very good for the longer term move on gold. And so basically I'm prepared for both. I'll be looking at breaks of the low here on the daily of this recent swing low to indicate to me that perhaps the daily is going to head back down towards 1800 and take it from that point onwards. As soon as it heads down towards 1750 and 1800, I'll be much happier, meaning that gold is then just let off some of this buying pressure and take a bit of a breather. And, you know, again, it can be back up within a week after that. It can be back up at the high. So it's not really as dramatic as it might seem to, you know, those who are very bullish on gold. You know, it could take a week or two's break and then be back up. You wouldn't even notice it after a while. And so that's really going to be my main driving factor this week, is prepared for gold to head lower, but at the same time my plan A will be for gold to continue higher, but also beautifully plan B would be to see it take a bit of a bigger breather. So silver as well had a really strong recovery back over that $27 level. It's also produced an inside bearish candle. Okay, it's still quite bullish in isolation in terms of the long wick underneath, but obviously just keeping that as a red candle, and it's bumping its head up against historical support as potential resistance. So in other words, silver is showing the same potential to me, to exactly the same way. It can continue upwards, but it can also continue, it could also take a nice move down. And so throughout this week, I'll be looking for price to head down towards these levels. In my mind, if price does head down towards this level, that's obviously not a sign of strength, and so that indicates the potential for that to be the case. Copper not adding anything interesting to me other than the fact that it has pulled back to the moving averages, produced that bullish candle. This was on my watch list last week, and in fact there could be an attempt to head higher this week by breaking the high of Friday's candle, and some opportunities to go up there. It is at a monthly resistance level, and therefore there are again those possibilities there. So then moving on to crude oils. So crude oil drifted a little bit higher this week, very lethargically, just not a lot going on there. It's still within this shaded range, and it has been there going back to June. So the entirety of June, July, and now of August, it still sits roughly within a $2 range, to maybe $3 range, and it hasn't really done much. It's still in this area. What it hasn't done so far, which I think is worth mentioning, is that it hasn't really followed through on last month's indecision candle by breaking the low. At this point in time, we're halfway through this month, and of course that means it could still happen. But what it does say to me is that there are plenty of bulls still in the market. All right, it hasn't shifted completely, obviously, to bearishness, hasn't rolled over yet. So my approach this week, we have actually got a lower high, but there is definitely resistance in this area, is actually going to be the same approach that I've had for the weeks prior to that. The bigger picture hasn't changed at all. The medium term and shorter term picture is just leaning that little bit more to the upside and expecting price to attempt to climb higher. But the trend itself hasn't got stronger, and that's one of the things that I was looking for that trend to pick up pace and become more aggressive, similar to what it was doing kind of going into May. And so that's what I'd really like to see happen before I go long on that. And of course, keeping an eye on recent swing lows to see if we start to break those and head down. It'll be the same on West Texas Intermediate. Same thing exactly. I just commented last week on the fact that it was now entering into a 618 and a 50 fib zone on top of the actual area in terms of that. So there's a lot of technical reasons why it is at least bumping its head up against the ceiling. Brent crude as well now pulling into that nice little moving average area there, now nice and orderly, looking nice and bearish. This again could be setting up to head lower. So it's at a fork in the road on the longer term and is potentially making it tricky on the shorter term to decide which way it wants to go. Lumber so far having been just one of the most outstanding kind of moving markets and commodities recently. Bitcoin. Okay, so Bitcoin and the cryptos are looking bullish. They are really very keen on breaking higher. So Bitcoin wants to break through this next level of resistance. It still has that potential. It's got room to go up to the next monthly level. And it's really attempting to do that. Of course, a pullback, a breakthrough, and a pulling back down to 10,000 in this case would be also welcomed, seeing as that was previous resistance. It doesn't have to do that. But if the market does pull back down to that, that will represent a really nice buying opportunity. At the same time, it is currently trying to set up as a potential breakout to the upside. Okay, so it is attempting so far, is looking as though it is trying to set up a bullish breakout pattern. And so there's both here. So my approach will be to keep an eye on it above this level on any breakouts this week. And of course, if it starts to break the low either shortly after or shortly before, then I'll start eyeing opportunities to the downside. Looking at Ethereum has very nicely, very bullishly continued to push on higher. It broke out outside of its own little level of local resistance at 400 and pushed on, producing a bullish candle. So its next levels here for me are 47 and 50 or 500, and so I'm looking for it to head up towards those. It is overextended on the weekly. Any kind of pullbacks would be very much appreciated. It doesn't mean it can't push on from here. It just means that in terms of probabilities, is it already overextended? Is it already entering overvalued? Yes, it is, in my opinion. And so looking for it to take a bit of a breather in this area. But again, of the two, this has clearly been the better performer going back, at least for Q2 for me, and now in Q3, Ethereum is just looking outstanding by comparison to Bitcoin. Then just very quickly, I want to jump and have a look. I'll do this actually in the next video. But yeah, so that's pretty much it for me. I'm favoring the cryptos for trading opportunities this week. Oil, waiting for it to decide which way it's going to go in terms of bullishness or bearishness. And I can jump on if it does start to trend strongly. I'll then be able to take advantage of that. Gold and silver, I'm looking for those lows and highs to wait for it to decide if it's going to do a weekly retracement and take a bit of a breather. At the same time, they've set up on the daily but haven't followed through. So I'll be watching those for the first couple of days to see if the weekend has given everyone a nice bit of a break, and then everyone returns and the optimism is there and it's going to be nice and bullish and head on up.